Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Peck. Tonight we welcome on first-time guest Lauren Caron. Lauren is the creator behind the YouTube channel Certainty for Uncertain Times, dedicated to exploring eschatology from a pre-trib, premillennial perspective. She believes we're rapidly approaching the tribulation and emphasizes the urgency of sharing Jesus with others. With a deep passion for end times prophecy, biblical doctrine, and truth, she delves into fringe topics that are increasingly relevant to today's world. Lauren aims to prepare her audience for what's to come and leave behind guidance for those left behind. She has been married for 21 years to her high school sweetheart, Lance, and they live in Missouri with their 5 cats, Dexter, Jasper, we have a cat named Jasper, Nora, Bianca, and Bella. Welcome to the show, Lauren. How are you doing?
Hey, Josh. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here today. Honestly, I was just telling Lance, like, it's so crazy. So many of you guys that I've just had just the blessing of meeting through the hand of the Lord. I've looked up to so many of y'all for the last like 4 to 5 years, roughly, when life changed and I started figuring out what was going on. But it's just wild. So thank you for having me on today.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have you on. Honor's all mine. You've had me on your show a couple of times, so it's good that we're getting to do this finally. So you have a video series called The Pleasure Trap that we're definitely going to be talking about. But before we get to that, as is tradition for all first-time guests on the Sharpening Report, can you tell us a bit about yourself, how you came to know Jesus, and how that led to what you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up in a Christian home, but I grew up in more of a religious type Christian home. My dad grew up Church of Christ. My mom grew up in like the Nazarene sector of Christianity. They got married and still were Church of Christ for a while, then kind of morphed over into the Christian church. And at the time, obviously, my dad, being the spiritual leader of the home, like they were all millennial. They were all the things, right? My mom wasn't, because her dad was definitely a pre-trib guy sitting on the front porch looking for Jesus back in the 80s. Born in 1904, had seen so much of the world change from, that lens. But anyway, grew up in a Christian home. It was just more of a religious home at the time. And when I met Lance, we were 15 years old, freshman year of high school. I noticed something was dramatically different about him than me. And Lance he had grown up in a different sect of the faith and just had a closer walk with the Lord that was really just based on relationship. We became friends. He did a lot of discipling with me, and he was in this play at the church called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. And he was the drug dealer in the play. And of course, this was a play just kind of really putting that whole eternal perspective in people's face, like you could die at any moment. And I got saved at that play when I was 15 years old. Again, even though I had kind of grown up in the church, like the gospel didn't really hit me, like fully understanding it until that night. And I just kind of realized, man, it's time. So anyway, Lance and I, of course, started dating not too many months after that, and eventually got married. We got married at the ripe old age of 18, and we've been married ever since, raising a lot of cats, as you mentioned in the biography. And we've just, it's been a sanctification process throughout the years, of course, walking with the Lord. And the last several years have made such an impact on my life, which is kind of what started the calling, so to speak, to get on YouTube to talk about Bible prophecy. Prior to 2020, I had a beauty channel on YouTube that was all based for girls that were more like what I called myself was a reformed tomboy, but a girl that, had grown up rolling in the dirt, smelling like outside, didn't know how to do hair and makeup, and I'm all self-taught. And so I wanted to teach women that, like, if they were like me and felt so lost in the world of like growing up and being a woman and, how to like put yourself together, or as my mother-in-law says, paint the barn, I could teach women how to do that. And so I didn't realize it then. The Lord was preparing me to be on camera for something totally different than something as superficial, if you will, as beauty is. And so anyway, that whole process was really just a preparation for doing what I'm doing now. And like most people, just kind of had that life shift, that altering in 2020, when you wake up and realize the world is not what you thought it was.
Yeah, amen. Well, praise God for all that. That's amazing. And so we're talking about you have a YouTube series called The Pleasure Trap. For those who might not be familiar with you on YouTube at all, and by the way, for anybody who's watching this, you should go subscribe to her channel. But can you give us just a real brief, just kind of introduction to what this series is about?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, in 2020, all of us remember, the day the world changed, right? We all remember that. And while I was a very political person growing up. I grew up in a home where, my dad was always listening to talk radio. Fox News was on every TV. Dad was constantly yelling at the radio. I've literally talked to Bill O'Reilly and Laura Ingraham before as a young woman, just calling into their shows and railing about what was going on in the political scene. Well, when we woke up to, everything in 2020, it was just like so much had changed. And in 2020, I started watching all this stuff unfold, going, something's not right. And then, of course, that morphed into seeing what we're seeing right now in our world, which we've seen it take another shift. And so this series was really about kind of helping people to understand that the elites as a whole are enslaving the masses. There is something in effect that most people know about and a lot of people don't, but it's called the Hegelian dialectic. And I spent a lot of time defining that out and helping people understand that, the right-left situation is really a paradigm. And a couple of years ago, back in 2020, I really thought, if anyone's familiar with, George Orwell's 1984, I really thought we would see this march up to the tribulation that was going to be more of this Orwellian perspective. And through the ways that things have unfolded, especially in light of this last election cycle, I kind of see it flipping towards more of an Aldous Huxley point of view, a Brave New World point of view that's really focused on technocrats, technology, advancements in science, and kind of like lulling people back to sleep. So it took me a while to get there. I really had a lot of cognitive dissonance with this whole situation and kind of fought it. In fact, it's the running joke in our household, but Lance had been telling me for years, babe, it's not going to look like this beast system that you think. It's really going to be this lulling of people to sleep, and it's going to formulate into that. I'm like, oh, you're wrong. You're totally wrong. Well, I've had to admit I'm wrong a ton of times in my life. And this is another one of those that we've kind of been seeing it unfold in that Huxley, scenario. Now, I will say there's a lot of overlap between the two views of an Orwellian and a Huxley. So you could call it, as I just made the slip, but Huxwell, or I don't even know how you'd say it with Orwell and Huxley together, but you get what I'm saying. It's going to be an amalgamation of the two. But right now, I feel like we're really in that Huxley phase of seeing it unfold here.
Yeah, let's dig into that some because you titled part one of your series 1984 was a distraction, which sounds like a bold statement. So why specifically do you believe that Brave New World is the real blueprint for today's global agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question. So I think the first thing people need to know is that, Huxley really warned about more of a control through fear, more of like surveillance force and censorship. Now, we can all think back to a time not too long ago that we were seeing that narrative play out in full force. But what we're seeing the shift take place now is more that Huxley has showed this, I would call it like a seduction through pleasure, where, rather than people actually being oppressed, it's more of like, let's just get them so full of like, all of the dopamine hits that we can possibly give them. And then we can actually oppress them that way. They won't realize it because they'll love the dopamine hits. They'll keep coming back for more, but that will be more of an effective path to control. And like I said, now, looking into 2020, even 2021, and even, the last several years, I've been going, holy smokes, man, we are so seeing the Orwellian side of this. I mean, so much so my husband and I are small business owners. My husband is a Christian life and fitness coach and owns a company called Joyfully Fit. Well, in 2021, in January, we got censored online, and the networks actually took down our ability to even run ads for our business because we stood up against tyranny. I got kicked out of so many stores in 2020 because I wouldn't comply with all of the tyrannical, things that were going on. And so much so that like we lost like 80% of our business and have had to rebuild things, which is why I've been working for a year at Texas Roadhouse serving part-time to make extra money. So the point is like for the last several years, we've been seeing that, but we could see how the narrative was being spun as it started to, push through this last election cycle and see how the tables were starting to turn because people were just railing against an Orwellian narrative. I was one of those, still am. So that's kind of the shift that took place. And like I said, it took me a while to get here. But I really just kind of wanted to help see if the pieces of the puzzle that we've been putting together in our home and even some other friends of ours that, are kind of in this space too, are putting together, wanted to see like, are we on the same page about this? Are we crazy? Is this where it's going? And so putting together this series, I thought would be helpful for people to see the 2 points of view and to see why I've taken the stance that I have.
I have just started a Substack. What is a Substack, you might ask? It is a place that contains early access to audio-only podcast versions of full daily Renegade videos, plus my personal blog, which includes original articles, show notes, interview transcripts, and so much more. This is the only place to get this amazing resource, and it is not available to the general public. Adding a subscription to my Substack to your daily Renegade membership will ensure that you have full access to every format of everything that I do. So head on over to joshpeck.substack.com or click on the link in the description below to join up now for only $5 a month or $50 a year. And if you can do it, I suggest doing the $50 a year because it's cheaper in the long run, and essentially you get 2 months for free. So I cannot wait to see you there. Take care and God bless. Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, this idea that, control today isn't enforced by fear, but by seduction. So what are some specific ways? How are the elites using pleasure and convenience to enslave people?
Yeah. So in Huxley's book, he talks about something called soma, and what it really just amounts to is mass medication, so to speak. So it's like a drug, basically. So in our world, it's more of the medications that we see. We've got, antidepressants, we've got opioids, and then we've got digital media. Essentially, soma is making rebellion kind of irrelevant, because what's happening is that we have more of a digital, setting aside the pharmaceuticals, because that's a whole other topic in and of itself. But what we have is more of like a digital soma that is achieving the same thing through a dopamine hit driven obedience. So you have things like, I talk about this all the time, even though I make a lot of short content, but you have dopamine loops via like TikTok, Instagram Reels. You've got Facebook Reels, or whatever they're called, Shorts, YouTube Shorts. You've got VR headsets. You've got pornography. You've got social media scrolling. I mean, I know for me, like, I try to take one day a week where, I put this stupid phone down and don't even look at it, and have everything just like, all the apps are dark. Everything's turned off, because it's so weird how your brain, you look at something and then you find yourself 3 minutes later wanting to look at something again. And so we're seeing that. And then the other thing is that people really are too entertained or medicated to notice tyranny. And that's been the big thing that I've been noticing. I remember, not too long ago when Zuckerberg came out with the metaverse, and I was like, whoa, this is so weird. I mean, it was so odd, because we even had pastors accepting this and trying to create digital communities to have church in, which keeps people out of the physical church and puts them in a digital verse that they can go to church in. And I'm like, something's so warped about that. I won't mention any names, but I remember hearing of a well-known, pastor, and I'm going, holy smokes, this is not cool. So it's a digital escapism is what it is. And it's this advanced form of, what Huxley, coins in his book called soma. And then the other true thing is that, or the other thing that I found is that really it's that if the, how do I say? So the elites, let's say it this way. The elites really don't need resistance if we're like actively passive, or I'm sorry, if we're passively pacified by freedom. If everything is labeled as freedom and it's the same branding as the old stuff that they were trying to push through in 2020, 21, all the things, but if it's branded differently, if it's labeled differently, and we call it freedom, we'll all get on board. A prime example would be the 15-minute cities that, most of us know, see in the World Economic Forum. We see all that stuff. But, I'm not here to rail on Trump, but Trump actually believes the same thing and calls them freedom cities. Mm-hmm. And so when you just change the labeling, every American is like, yes, freedom cities, whatever that means, I'm for it. And they're not even looking hard enough to actually see it's the same exact thing as a 15-minute city, that especially those of us watching from a prophecy lens, and that lens should be going at, yeah, no, this is a check mark towards the beast system.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And, a lot of people think that Aldous Huxley was warning us, but you suggest that he was actually laying out a plan. So what made you come to that conclusion about his intentions and even his connections?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, whenever I start diving into somebody, I'm always going back to, who are they connected to? Like, that's the big question. And I would say the first place that I really try to go and connect people to is Freemasonry, the Jesuit order, or any secret society that I can find, because typically if they're involved in that, they're tied together to the overall Luciferian agenda, the NWO plan, all of that. If they're involved in one of those secret societies, that's where it's going. Now, sadly to say, I was kind of disappointed because I couldn't tie Huxley to Freemasonry. However, what I could do is his family ties were very interesting. So his family promoted eugenics. And I think we can all think of some people that we know that are very proud eugenicists, right? And that are promoting those types of programs and things of that nature. We have, evolution. He was a huge evolutionist. And then, of course, the technocracy. Now, obviously, this book was written a long time ago, so it's different. But his brother, Julian Huxley, actually ran UNESCO, and he openly pushed for transhumanism and population control. So those things were really interesting to me. And then, of course, he does have ties to the Fabian Society, the Tavistock Institute, and then something called Esalen or Esseline. Hopefully I say it right. But that's really linked to MK Ultra. So those things I'm like, well, those are, while they're not necessarily, I mean, the Fabian Society is kind of a secret society or an order of that realm, but not the same as like the most known ones that we all know go, yeah, those are not good. But he also promoted psychedelic control and then spiritual detachment through drugs. Josh, how much of that do we see going on right now? Like,
No kidding.
It's everywhere. Like shrooms are the big thing, and it's crazy. And people just have no idea that they are literally tapping the door and opening it to the spirit realm, as you and I have spent so much time talking about on different videos. And so when he wrote Brave New World, he was actually surrounded by a whole lot of elite thinkers that were shaping future policies. And that's what we're kind of seeing roll out. And I even have in the second video, I have a quote from Elon Musk where he's actually talking to the Government World Summit. And I believe it was in January of this year. And these guys were just drilling him about AI, just asking him all these questions, like, should we be nervous about it? Like all of these different things. And Huxley said that, we have to teach it truth, first of all. And I'm like, oh, what truth are you teaching, bro? What are we talking about here? And then the second thing he said was, well, what we have to really realize is that it's going to be more of like an Aldous Huxley Brave New World. And I was like, well, this couldn't come at a better time because I'm producing this video series on this. So those leaders are connected to that. And you always want to see, like, even our current leaders, what books are they loving? What people do they love as philosophers? Like, all of those things matter because that shaped their worldview. And then lastly, what I have here on one of my bullet points is that for Huxley, his worldview actually aligned with those globalist ideals that we're seeing now. So you got social engineering, managed evolution, and then spiritual deception, which is all of the blueprint that we're seeing kind of unfold right now for us.
Yeah, for sure. And adding to this, something that we talk about a lot on this channel, you get into some powerful parallels between Huxley's caste system and modern technologies like CRISPR and AI. How do you see these tools being used to restructure society in real time?
Yeah. So funnily enough, I was just watching one of your other videos on your channel that you released the other day, and you were talking about, the animals and all of that. And you mentioned CRISPR. And I think you said something, forgive me if I misquote it, you can correct me here, but you were talking about something where they were using CRISPR to now put the genes of an animal and a human together. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, holy smokes, I'll have to remember to bring that up. So thank goodness I remembered. But at any rate, CRISPR is definitely one of those big technologies that's using gene editing to, engineer intelligence, compliance. I mean, now it's so crazy that you can actually have, you can try to figure out how to create the perfect baby. Like, what is that? Like, they're taking things away from our creator. Like, they're trying to make it, and they do it so sneakily, right? They do it in this way that makes it look good to the masses. And some of the technology that we have, not talking about the gene editing, we'll get to some of the other ones, but one that comes to mind right now is, since I work at Roadhouse, I have, a lot of people that come in and out of the restaurant. Well, there's this family that comes in often, and their little girl was born deaf. And they did that surgery where they put the electrodes on her brain, and she has these little stems that sit on her head, and she can hear. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen technology wise. And I'm like, it's amazing to see. Like, those things to me, those get my heartstrings, because I'm thinking, if I had a baby that was born deaf, right, I would want to, is there a technology out there that could fix this so my child doesn't have to go, through life with that limitation? But anyway, back to the CRISPR and all of that. The technologies, the modern caste system of elites is really just this, it's more of like an underclass situation that's being engineered, and it's not born. So we've got, AI is replacing human jobs and knowledge. Like, we're seeing that everywhere. Literally was just watching a video with Mondo and Lee today talking about the dangers of AI. And of course, they're talking about all the great things that it serves us to, because it does. It's not just black or white. And a lot of people are really stuck on that, but it's not. And then we have, it's really what's really happening though, is that it's shifting that power to the tech elites. And that's what's been weird to me too, after this election cycle. Like, we're seeing all these tech people just come into the forefront as if they're part of the government, which is super weird to me. So what we see, I feel like, is more of a digital caste system that's kind of emerging, with more of like an AI alpha and like a docile human, underclass. And AI is getting smarter and humans are getting dumber. It kind of seems like it's like that. And then, like I said, you have, all these guys that are coming into this administration that Trump is linking arms with, which does bother me, that, he's linking arms with, Elon Musk and Sam Altman. And honestly, all those people lead right back to Klaus Schwab. They lead right back to the World Economic Forum. So AI is really, it's necessary to push for that progress. And if we have the goal in mind, well, what is their goal? Well, I think it's to have an elite controlled evolution where everyone is truly in digital chains and they're okay with it. Because again, if they're giving them something that tastes pleasurable to them, they're not even going to notice the chains that they're in.
I've talked about it many times before, but the ancient Jewish group called the Essenes, who were around at the time of Christ, said that they were the ones who kept the original prophetic calendar God gave to Adam. Did you know that calendar has actually been reproduced today from the fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls? That's right, and now you can own one for yourself. So the Dead Sea Scroll wall calendar is now available and contains both the Essenes calendar as well as our own calendar, so you can compare the dates and see if they fall on anything interesting or prophetic in this amazing and ancient calendar. The calendar itself was developed by Dr. Ken Johnson and put into print by yours truly, so proceeds from the sales of this calendar go to support both Dr. Ken Johnson's ministry as well as Daily Renegade. It's amazing because this is the exact calendar that the Bible itself uses from Genesis all the way to Revelation. It's a great study tool and can even make a great gift for your prophecy-loving friends and family members. Click on the link in the description below to pick up yours today. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that too, and, there's obviously never going to be a perfect candidate. I voted for Trump, but that doesn't mean that there's no criticisms to be had. I'm not a big fan of the Elon Musk, Sam Altman kind of stuff either, and the real push for AI. On one hand, I get it. Other foreign countries are doing it, so we want to be able to compete, and we don't want them to overrun us. But at the same time, it's like, what are we really going towards for here? And in part two, you make the case that Trump is not opposing the technocratic system. He's actually essential to it, which to some people is controversial. But
Yes.
can you walk us through how you arrived at that view?
Yes. Now, let me just state, because I know this is where I lose some people, and let me just say this, when people watch this, it's okay if you don't agree with me. I'm okay with that. All I'm simply doing is presenting you with the things that I've personally found. And I also want people to know, like, if you've never met me before, I only wish you knew me in the past, because I was the most die-hard, like, I would bleed red, white, and blue if you cut me open, Republican girl. I worked for the Bush-Cheney campaign. That was the first year that I got to vote, was in 2004. Met Dick Cheney. Like, I've been to rallies. I've been to all kinds of things to serve the country from that lens, because my biblical values are so important to me. And I really believe for all this time that the Republican Party was that party that aligned with my biblical values. So where I kind of got to this, and like I said, it was hard because I was a big fan of Trump in 2020, went and voted for him. I got t-shirts galore. I got hats. I got all the things, right? But I really believe, and like I said, this is where it gets hard, so y'all bear with me, but I really believe that in 2016, Trump was actually selected. I really don't align anymore with the belief that our elections are elected by the people. And I think we saw that, come about, in the year that we did, and we'll be careful what we talk about. However, nothing ever came about it. I think that was on purpose to let people know how the system really worked. Because a lot of times what you find in the Luciferian agenda with these people they're doing what they're doing, they're constantly showing you what they're doing. It's part of how they work. They have to do it by their own, we'll call it laws. They have to tell the people what they're doing. Almost like they believe this like karma situation. Well, if we tell them, we're not really held responsible because we told them, even if it was kind of secretive. Okay. So the reason I believe that Trump had to be the guy in 2016 is because the narrative for 2020 was always there. That was there. It was going to come out whether people liked it or not. You do the research on your own. You can figure out that this was an absolute sham of what happened. It was injected into the society. In saying that, everyone, what I propose in the video, especially the second one, is to ask a few questions. If Hillary had been the person at the podium in 2020 that told you, we're going to shut down the churches, you're not going to be able to work, we're going to go into lockdown, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, would you have sat silent? Most people go, no, they wouldn't have. And here's the thing. I did it too. Those first 2 weeks, I knew something was wrong, but because I trusted Trump and because he was my guy, I questioned less. Now, if that would have been Hillary, I would have been like, oh, they're not doing, I'm not doing that. No way. And I can only imagine if Lance and I would have had a brick and mortar studio, what would have happened to us, since we were online at that time, but prior to that, we had a brick and mortar studio. I can't even imagine what would have happened. So, the reality of it is, though, is that it wasn't Hillary who shut down the churches. It wasn't Hillary who pushed lockdowns and who normalized, the experiment that a lot of people went out and got. It was Trump. And I think that, unfortunately, we have to, and I hate saying it because it stings, y'all, because at the end of the day, there's still that conservative girl on the inside of me that, wants the best things for the country. But we have to ask the tough questions sometimes that we don't like the answers to. And so what I feel like happened is that this situation created trust so that conservatives would accept the solution, even if it was a globalist, and even if the situation itself had a globalist outcome. And so now what's been hard for me is seeing Trump align with people like, Musk and Altman and Big Pharma and the AI infrastructure. And it's almost like there's been this rebranding, like I mentioned at the outset, giving the example of 15-minute cities, but it's been this repackaging of the whole NWO as patriotic, but I feel like it's the Trojan horse.
That is such an interesting point. And, going along those lines, you mentioned Project Stargate, and we know how that's tied to AI, healthcare, digital IDs, and even occult symbolism. What's the connection there, and why should people be paying attention?
Yeah, so that's been the tough one. And I think that is a lot too of what opened up my eyes to the reality of, I've always believed the government's not for me, but I aligned with a lot of, political figures and things like that who even did things that I disagreed with, right? But I would just go along with it because, well, it was the best option, I get it. But the day after the inauguration, Trump came out and launched Project Stargate. And I'm going, does anybody know what Stargate means? The Christian people in the fringe world do. We all know that it means portal. We're very aware that has a term. That is an occult term. It means something. So, what we saw and what we're seeing is this AI healthcare fusion, if you will, that, again, just launched right under Trump. And what was wild to me is that I watched, he gave a speech not too long ago at the World Economic Forum. Now it was through the interwebs, right? But he mentioned that he would use whatever emergency declarations he needed to basically fast track the surveillance tech that he's using to fast track all these AI data centers, all of that stuff. And essentially what's happening is it's going to be emergency declarations that are used to track everything, but it's going to be done under the banner of public health. And that's been really concerning to me because we're seeing all this stuff. And again, I want to make it very clear. I don't think there's anything wrong with AI. I don't think that it's inherently evil or bad. I think it's going to be used full out when, after the rapture happens and the beast system is running fully and under the Antichrist. I fully think it's going to be used for that. Just like the internet is not bad. You can find plenty of bad things on the internet, but the internet in and of itself is not bad. Okay. So I want to be very clear about that. Because like I said, so many people are getting very black and white on this stuff. And I think we just still have to use some level of well, yes, that's right. But yes, let's also remember this. Let's find the balance, so to speak. So at any rate, basically these systems are, they're backed by OpenAI, Oracle, SoftBank. And if the emergency orders are being used to roll out, my question is, why is it such an emergency? Why do we have to do this so fast? And to your point about getting there first, I think that that's true, but I also think that everybody has that agenda in mind is to control the world. And that's what it's really about. It's to get there so that it's all the systems plug into the right outlets fast enough so that it's done. And the thing that gets me about it is with this situation with Stargate is it's really promising personalized medicine, early detection, cancer prevention. How? Altering your gene, these are the questions we have to ask. So my real concern is oh, I see where this is going. We're going to go to digital health ID. We're going to go to biometric surveillance. We're going to go to control of data. My mom and dad, I grew up in a family of small business owners. My parents have quite the story, but my brother had a heart transplant. My dad had open heart surgery. And at one time, my parents were in $500,000 worth of medical debt. Now, my mom and dad started their own business. My mom, she typed very well and she started a medical transcription company. Well, in 2008, I believe, when Obama was in office, that was when all of the electronic medical records started, and EMR shifted the entire face of their business. And it's doing that again. And so it's all this stuff. And that was another stepping stone to get where we are now, to get everybody's records all on one system so that whether you show up in, California or, Texas and you have to go to the hospital, they'll be able to find your information. Now, again, on the surface, that looks great. Like if you break your leg in Texas, but your insurance is in California, they have all this data and medical records about you. That's wonderful. But we have to also consider, like, where's all this going? And that's really the main thing that I'm trying to get people to ask the questions of. Like, yes, okay, we see this, but where's it all going? So you mentioned the occult reference. And the one thing I wanted to mention is that, the original CIA project is out there with Project Stargate 2, and it's all about remote viewing and mind control. So if people want to go down a rabbit hole, it's an interesting one. So for me, whenever I see names like that and I see these ties, I just don't think that they're by happenstance, coincidence, or by chance. I think that they're intended to let people know. And if you do know, or you're in the know, or you understand the terminology, you can see where people stand based on those types of namings, associations, and things of that nature. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I totally agree with you how a lot of people just look at the surface benefits and they don't look at where this leads. And this is something that I talk about all the time on my channel. It's like whenever these things are presented, it's always through rose-colored glasses. It's always with the most altruistic purposes. Like you mentioned that deaf girl can hear now. That's beautiful. That's wonderful, of course. And we want that. But then other things that it's used for, or other things that it can lead to. And I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you about AI, transhumanism, the global control grid, and how this connects with prophetic passages like Revelation 13 and Daniel 2. But before I do, if people want to view this series, where can they go to do that? And where can people find you online?
Yeah, so they can go to my YouTube channel is Certainty for Uncertain Times. And if you type in the search bar, you'll totally come up with it. And there's a series inside of like YouTube has playlists, and it's called The Pleasure Trap, How Elites Are Controlling the Masses. That's where they can find the 2-part series. Part 1 is laying the foundation, the groundwork, understanding Aldous Huxley, who he was tied to. What we hit on today with these questions are just very brief things that, we got into. The whole video will explain that. And then the second video really goes into where it's all headed today and how right now we're in the Huxley version of this, but we very well will see an amalgamation. And eventually, I really believe truly in the tribulation, it'll turn back into that Orwellian system where it's full blown force, especially if you are left behind here and you're trying to survive the tribulation. It'll totally be a Orwellian path for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I highly suggest everybody watching go subscribe to her channel. Make sure you click the bell to turn on all notifications because YouTube has a nasty habit of unsubscribing people all the time.
Yeah.
So I highly suggest people go check that out. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the first half of this episode of the Sharpening Report. If you are a Bible-believing Christian who opposes the kingdom of darkness trying to run the world right now, then you are a renegade to the satanic system. We here at Daily Renegade wear that badge proudly. So, if you're a renegade as well and you want to see the rest of this video, head on over to dailyrenegade.com right now and get a membership today. Not only will you get the rest of this video, but you'll get our full catalog of Sharpening Report episodes and Daily Renegade update videos on topics such as Bible prophecy, science, technology, the Nephilim, aliens, and so much more. All of our episodes at Daily Renegade are early access, so as a member, you'll get the videos before anyone else does. Daily Renegade also offers videos not available anywhere else due to social media censorship. We also have a community page only for members where we can all fellowship together without fear of censorship. It's basically the best of Facebook and YouTube rolled into one without any of the garbage. Memberships are only $10 a month or $100 a year, and if you can do it, I suggest getting the $100 a year because it's cheaper in the long run, and essentially you get 2 months for free that way. So come join our family of renegades at dailyrenegade.com right now. The link is in the description below, and we'll see you